Oh, what a cute baby.
So hello everybody, and hello again to people I already said hello to. So we'll start as usual with about 15 minutes of meditating on bodhicitta. So one thing I wanted to say is, I don't know if you're in the habit of watching Ushoji Dalai Lama when he teaches. So something that comes up again and again with His Holiness is meditating on bodhicitta, meditating on emptiness, quenching bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta. So, yeah, it was very nice last night. And in the mind training teachings, which is in a way another way of saying in the Bodhisattva teachings, the Mahayana teachings, they all boil down to all the Bodhisattva teachings of the Buddha boil down to mind training, and the mind training boils down to the 5 powers. And of the 5 powers, the first one, not just by chance, but really is the first one in the day, you could say, because the 5 powers talk about how you sort of how to give your life some structure in terms of the Bodhisattva way. You could put it that way. And so it's the first is the power of the plan, or power of the intention, pimbito, anyway. It's to do with making a plan. Not just I suppose that when we make a plan in general, it's, you sort of sit down, this is what we're going to do. But anyway, it's creating this determination in your mind that will keep going through the day. So the plan never to be separated from the practices of the 2 bodhicittas, as they call them, conventional ultimate bodhicitta. So it just means bodhicitta as we usually understand it, and bodhicitta in the sense of meditating on emptiness. So during this evening, we spend a little time on each of those. So here, first of all, partly because it helps make one's life meaningful, and partly because it's what we normally do at the beginning of anything really, but especially if we're doing some kind of class or meditation or some kind of practice, we always try to make sure we have the bodhicitta motivation. And when you have 15 minutes to meditate on bodhicitta, it's kind of, free form, freestyle. 15 minutes could be spent simply thinking, holding that thought in the mind. For the sake of all sentient beings, I really have to achieve enlightenment. I think it's better when it's not just like, for the sake of all other sentient beings, even of other sentient beings, I must achieve enlightenment, but thinking, therefore, I'm going to follow the Bodhisattva way, practicing the 6 perfections, practicing mind training, transforming difficulties into the path, renouncing selfishness, that kind of thing. In other words, for the sake of all sentient beings, I have to achieve enlightenment. In other words, to really help sentient beings, I need to achieve enlightenment. And in order to achieve enlightenment, I'll do anything which is necessary, no matter how hard it is. No matter how hard it gets, actually, it's never harder than just avoiding difficulties, running away, facing difficulties. That's the best thing. It's not always easy, of course. So in this, so you could simply think that over and over again, but sometimes it's nice to take whatever part of the bodhicitta meditations sort of takes your attention, grabs your attention. Do you feel drawn to, that you feel would be useful to spend this time thinking about? So anyway, meditating on bodhicitta also involves meditating on compassion. So I think it's very nice to think of the first line about, in the verses on the Bodhisattva practices in the Lama Chöpa, very first line says, Nyam tat roa tigun dagima. These pitiful sentient beings, transmigratory beings, it means the same thing actually. Sometimes you see transmigratory beings, sometimes you see migratory beings. I think the idea is, beings who are going from life to life under the control of karma and mental afflictions. So that means the same as sentient beings. Anybody who's not enlightened is a sentient being, and anybody who's not enlightened, who's not a Buddha, is a transmigratory being. So that's the language it uses anyway. So these pitiful sentient beings, Tikun, all of them, Dagima, are my mothers. So thinking about that means thinking about the suffering of sentient beings and thinking about the sentient beings who are suffering. All means like infinite, actually, in this case. They're all my mother. It's my mother. They're my mothers. My mothers are in this pitiful state. Think about the suffering in this world even, just in this world. And there are other realms. Think about the animals that live amongst us, the suffering they experience. My mothers. So anyway, let's spend some time thinking about that then. That's one thing you could do with this time. Developing compassion as the driving force of the bodhicitta. Now, please, let's spend a few minutes watching the breath, mindful of the breath. And now, meditating on pure mind. So just briefly, remember what this means is not paying attention to the senses, the objects of the senses, just the mental consciousness, not thinking about the past, not thinking about the future, just being aware of the present mind, which is clear and knowing, or clarity and awareness. Very much like looking at a mirror and focusing on the mirror without focusing on what's being reflected in it. Focusing on what does the reflecting. Now we spend about 15 minutes meditating on emptiness, selflessness, and Atman. And how we can do that is, as Solas mentioned last night, there are different ways, but anyway, this is one way. So we think my body, things that we really identify with, I guess, my body, my physical body, my speech, the speech with which I communicate with others, my mind. So it seems like there's an I that is in the sense, the owner of, let's say, that body, that speech, that mind. Otherwise, we wouldn't say my body, my speech, my mind, would we? So where is that I? So spend a while looking for that I in your body, in your speech, in your mind. And then when or if you get to the point where you feel there's nothing in my body or my speech or my mind, I can point out and say, that's me, that's I. And then just allow your mind to go into the unfindability of that when you search, the non-existence of that I when you search for it in your body and speech and mind. Time to wake up. Okay, so gonna continue using the screen share for a little bit. Okay, so we're still looking at the practices in terms of how you relate to the spiritual guide, virtuous friend, when you have one. And so, how to practice in terms of your attitude, and how to practice in terms of your actions. So in terms of the attitude, then you have the developing faith, seeing the Guru as an enlightened being, and then there's the appreciation of the kindness. So we already talked about this a bit already. So according to the explanation from Pabonga Tejin Mingpo in Liberation, following his teacher, now I can't remember his name, but anyway, we did mention it before. Maybe it's on the previous one. Never mind. Anyway, I did mention. So you have first thinking about how it's important to view the Guru in that way, so that, like, the purpose, and thinking how it's possible, and then the actual way to do it. That was it, wasn't it? But anyway, we're looking at so yeah, then Lama Zopa. So there are 4 points for this, isn't it? 4, yeah. And Lama Zopa advises starting with doing them back to front. So starting with the 4th one. So we already looked a bit at that. Yeah. Looked at some examples of how various students at first saw their teacher in a very ordinary way and discovered that they were really quite amazing. Reminds me of the story of Naropa and Mapa. So you know Mapa, Milarepa's guru. So anyway, one time when Mapa was training with Naropa, I guess, I know it sounds like, according to the story, it would have been like first thing in the morning. So Naropa calls Mapa outside, and outside there's Nalanda, and then not Nalanda, Naropa, and then somehow in the sky there's the whole of the, I think, Guya Samaja mandala and deities. So then Naropa said, so which one are you going to prostrate to first? So Mapa, thinking that the Guru I see every day, but the Guya Samaja mandala is something I see only quite rarely. So he prostrated to the Guya Samaja mandala first. And Naropa snapped his fingers and it all absorbed into his heart. And he told him that he'd made quite a mistake by making that choice. So anyway, yeah, I don't know, I just felt like saying that. I thought of it. So here's one thing then. Okay, so this particular one, the fourth one, which we're dealing with first, I still want to go through these this screen sharing, these notes, because it's quite a long section. And like I said, if you want to read it, then read it. Very good. But anyway. So it's very interesting actually, because this fourth one, which you're looking at first. So let's say the first one. It's because if you think about it, part of you thinks this person can't be an enlightened being because they seem so ordinary. So really, this first one is working with the whole idea of appearances and how the way things appear isn't always how they really are. And here's one prime example: that if it's true across the board that however things appear, that's really how they are, then everything would be truly existent. Because everything appears truly existent, everything appears inherently existent, so it'd have to be inherently existent. So that's very useful that we already have that kind of awareness that from any teaching on emptiness, that things aren't the way they appear. So if things aren't the way they appear in general, then why would I have to assume that when my guru appears ordinary, that therefore he or she must be ordinary? Then the thing about the sun going down, which I've mentioned before, which has now become one of my favorite, because it's just so difficult to see it otherwise, and you know that it is otherwise. It's not, the sun isn't going down. And then seeing moving scenery when you're traveling in a car, sometimes it looks like the trees are rushing by you, but they're not. And everybody knows lots of other ones like that, aren't there? Like when you're sitting in and we get taken in by it sometimes. You're sitting in a train and the train on the other platform is moving and you think you're moving. If it's an Indian train, it's not so likely that because if it's moving, then you know it's moving. But actually, that's not true. Even in Indian trains, sometimes you can be tricked by that. So I'm sure you can think of other ones. Like if you light a stick of incense in the dark and twirl it around, you see a circle, even though there's no circle there. But you see a circle. And neon lights, the moving ones, always looks like something's moving, but it's not moving. It's just lights going off and on, isn't it? There's all sorts of things like that. And then this is from Yeshisundra's Lamrim, Essence of Nectar, which is a very nice Lamrim teaching text. Until we're free from this dark veil of bad karma, even if all the Buddhas appeared before us, we would still only perceive them in this manner, as ordinary. Not as supreme bodies graced with marks and signs. So the point is, it's like, well, I think I'm repeating myself, but if the Buddhas appear in the most pure form, then only other enlightened beings can see them. That's the Dharmakaya. If they appear in a slightly more accessible form, which is the enjoyment body, Sambhogakaya, then only Arya Bodhisattvas can see them. So then for people who are not Arya Bodhisattvas, then there is the Supreme Emanation body, which is like the Buddha Shakyamuni. So that's, Buddha Shakyamuni is already come. So we don't see the Buddhas in that form. So the point is they have to appear in a way that it's not even worked out, I don't think. They just appear according to our karma. And if you haven't got the karma to see anybody, I guess you don't see anybody. But that's the point anyway. Even if, some people would say, well, the Buddhas are all around us all the time anyway. But just for argument's sake, suppose all the Buddhas are standing in front of you, you'd only be able to see them in an ordinary form because that's all we've got the karma for. our mind isn't pure enough to see anything more than that. So yeah, so actually this is quite wide reaching, this whole idea, because see, you can't assume that somebody's ordinary just because they're appear ordinary. So here we're saying, the guru might appear ordinary, but that's nothing to go by. They're actually, how else could they appear? That doesn't mean they're not an enlightened being. And it's also like that with the people around us. You don't know. You don't know what level of being the person is you're talking with in general. So they say, about bodhisattvas, one reason that we create so much negative karma, burn up so much good karma, is because we don't recognize bodhisattvas, and then we just treat them like ordinary beings, and then that create quite a lot of bad karma that way. The point is, anyway, there's this analogy. The analogy is of coals underneath ashes. So looks just like ashes, nothing there, but if you were to tread on it, then you get burnt. So it's like that. So we have to be careful with everybody. Like with Shantideva, there's a story of him. He was known. I mean, we know about Shantideva, right? The one, there's a whole story. He's a pretty amazing person, the author of the Bodhisattva Charivatara. And so, when he was at, I think, Nalanda Monastery, not the one in France, the original one in India. So he was known as the three perceptions, Jujisumba, something like that. So anyway, I don't know why they say three perceptions, but anyway, because all anybody could see him doing was eating, sleeping, and going to the toilet. Three things. But they soon found out, when they kind of tricked him into giving a teaching, because they thought that he would show himself up because he didn't know anything, because he never studied, never meditated, never did anything. So then he says to the assembly of monks, do you want to hear something new, or do you want to hear something old? And so they said, let's hear something new. And then he recited the Bodhisattva. So they thought he was very ordinary, but he was by no means ordinary. Then this is also quite interesting, a point that Pabonka Tejin makes. So if you like to drink and you see your guru drinks, you might think that's a good thing. You see it as a quality, something to admire, Yeah, he's great, he's the same as us, he likes to drink. Likes to go down the pub, bar. But then if you're a teetotaler and you see your guru drink, then you would see it and think of it as a fault. And same with eating meat. And I can relate to that, because it's like you sort of feel like you ought to be a vegetarian. Seems like the right thing to do. But then when you see one of your teachers eats meat, then you're like, that's great. You feel like you've got their approval kind of thing. So it's like that, isn't it? But I'm sure that for people who are vegetarians, and then if they see the teachers eating meat, they probably have a little bit of an issue with that. So it's like that, isn't it? Then in Liberation, on page 47, it says, Buddhas may appear in the form of a hateful, stingy, lame, crazy, or immoral person if it will serve a worthwhile purpose. Or as a butcher. There's stories of people, I don't know stories anyway. I heard a story of a butcher, not just somebody who cuts up meat, but who kills the animals in Lhasa. But he was, like practicing poa, sending their minds to the Pure Land. Was what he was actually doing. So yeah, anyway, and there's no way you can say that that an enlightened being wouldn't appear in that form. I think if we were to sit down and think about it, we could find that there could be some benefit in, an enlightened being appearing in the form of somebody very hateful for you to practice patience, somebody who's very stingy, that makes you think about, your own stinginess, practice of generosity and so on. Yeah, there's all sorts of possibilities. So again, just because they appear, if Buddhas can appear in that way, which would also appear very ordinary to us, and yet they're still enlightened beings. So why would, what reason do we have for thinking that our guru is not an enlightened being just because of the way they appear to be ordinary? So yeah, so kind of by way of a summary, when you see a person doing something that seems very ordinary, it could be because you simply misread the situation. And then sometimes it's useful to think, and maybe this is the whole purpose, is that you're just seeing your own faults. What you see as ordinary, actually you're seeing your own ordinariness. So in one way, like I was saying before, seeing ordinary, that ordinary appearance is a reflection of your own impurity. And sometimes reflecting back our own faults, like some people say this, and sometimes it seems quite true, that the fault that you see, sometimes in others in general, but particularly, they apply it to this case of Guru, seeing the Guru as an enlightened being, that the fault you see is actually just your own fault. It's literally your own fault, like appearing to be very irritable, showing that actually you're very irritable and that you have something to do with it in your own practice of patience and so on. So appearing as a demon or a screaming customer. Maybe this is another section. There's something which Gyumi Kizumji, Lozan Jamba, I've heard him mention a couple of times. I can't remember in the context, but there's a verse where it's in. I think it might come further on, but anyway, in the sutra called the meeting of the father and son, the father being the Buddha's father, the son being the Buddha. So it talks about the Buddha can appear as a demon, as Brahma, Chakra, great gods and so on, according to whatever is useful for sentient beings. And then if you take the reason of one guru appearing ordinary to conclude that they are not enlightened, then you'll end up saying none of your gurus is an enlightened being, so you're going to end up saying the enlightened beings are not helping us at all, even though they could help us, but they don't. And then sometimes when you see something that looks very ordinary, maybe even super ordinary, then you need to just say, sometimes all you can say is, I don't know. I don't expect to understand everything. That can be very helpful. Just some thoughts. So it's thinking this way is a very powerful method for stopping negative thoughts in general, especially towards people in general. And something which I think can be very helpful. And this is to some degree maybe relevant to this particular topic, about the Guru. But I think it's sometimes, because whatever anybody does, no matter how awful what somebody might have done, there's no reason for us to get angry with them, right? It doesn't serve a purpose. So sometimes reminding yourself, actually, I didn't see it happen. I didn't personally see it happen. So my knowledge of it having happened is totally based upon what I've been told by others, or maybe what I've read in the news, heard on the news. You know, I think that's useful sometimes. And we do know that, you know, so then this is certainly more general, but I mean, yeah, we have so many stories about people that even were executed and then they discovered afterwards that they were not guilty, or people that have been in prison for, even on death row, you know, for 20 years or 30 years or whatever, and then it's discovered using new techniques that they actually were not guilty at all. So you can't even be sure just because somebody's been convicted of doing something bad that they nevertheless did that. You can never be too sure. And then tinted glasses, yes. So when you're wearing tinted glasses, like if you were wearing pink tinted glasses, everything looks pink. So everything is, that's just an analogy. Everything is, your perception of people is colored by your own way of perceiving. That's the thing. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so for now, maybe I'm going to stop sharing because I think this is quite a short section, so it might be nice to read the section itself. It's almost not much more than a page. Stop share. Okay. So this is on page 39. So he says, so this one is about how, so starting from with the fourth one, you know, how the way we perceive things isn't really reliable. You can't just draw conclusions just based on how things appear to you. Then going back to the third one, which is called even in this translation, even nowadays, even these days, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are acting on behalf of all sentient beings. So, of course, the conclusion is going to be, therefore, my teacher is one of those Buddhas helping me these days. We can indeed be certain that Vajradhara is currently using emanations of himself to act on behalf of sentient beings. Why? Because it is a fact that the Buddhas are distinctly aware of the circumstances in which all sentient beings live. So, of course, this is that kind of, that point assumes or depends upon the idea that an enlightened being, there is such thing as omniscient mind. In other words, there is such thing as omniscient mind. So Buddhas are able to, or not just able to, but are, you know, the mind is so kind of like purified and developed that you're aware of everything everything all the time, and actually present everywhere at all times as well. This isn't so, I think it's maybe not so obvious in the sutra teachings, but in the, you know, in the tantric teachings, then they talk about you know, when you achieve enlightenment, then your mind, you have your very subtle mind, subtle body, which are indivisible. They're only differentiated in terms of their function. They actually can't be separated. So when your mind, where your mind is, also your body is, you are physically. So for this reason, you're able to like manifest immediately. There's no delay. It's not like if a sentient being needs your help, you wouldn't be aware of it. If a sentient being needs your help, then you would be aware. And it's not like you'd have to travel from a long way away to get there. It's like you're there already. So that's why they say, you know, all the enlightened beings are kind of like surrounding us at all times anyway. So this argument does depend upon that idea of omniscience, the possibility that the mind can become so developed, so purified that you can actually become, so that there's no obscurations. If you think of it in terms of obscurations in the mind, it simplifies it in a way, because in other words, why is it that I am not aware of everything right at this moment? Like, why is it I don't know everything very precisely and perfectly at this moment? There's something, you can almost feel it. There's an obscuration in the mind that's preventing that. So then the question is, well, where do those obscurations come from? What is it possible to remove them? So, the general teaching is you can remove all obscurations through the practice of, through meditating on emptiness, supported by bodhicitta, the method side, bodhicitta. That is able to gradually, remove all obscurations, layer by layer, until there's no obscuration left. Then if there's no obscuration, that means there's nothing obstructing your mind from perceiving everything everywhere. So assuming that for the moment, it's also a fact that their love for sentient beings is even greater than that of a mother for her only child. So he says it is also a fact, but that's actually something to think about, isn't it? Why would an enlightened being feel, what is it, a fact that, that the love, the loving kindness, or the love, the affection that a Buddha feels towards each one of us sentient beings would be even more intense, even more powerful than a mother for her only child? Not quite sure. It could have something to do with the fact that no matter how strong that love of the mother for her only child is, it's limited by the other sort of like messy things, the different destructive emotions that limit it. So now there's no limitation. Could be like that. And even with, even when it's the love of a mother for her only child, that's pretty powerful, and it's also pretty pure, but there could also be a little bit of, grasping, eye grasping. Okay. That's okay. The person who needs to leave, no problem. So, thus it must be true that they are presently carrying out without interruption whatever activities are most beneficial for all sentient beings. Why then would they not be acting on our behalf? So, this paragraph is saying, so they know and they care, so why wouldn't they help? They know, they care, and they can, therefore why wouldn't they help? They know we need help. They care for us. If they just knew and didn't like us, they might just think, tough luck. But they care. So they know and they care. And even though they know and they care, I mean, sometimes we know and we care, but we just don't have the ability, right? So now if you know and you care and you also have the ability, then why would you not help? So then, if you were to say that the Buddhas are not helping you at the moment, it must be either because they're not aware, or they're aware but they don't care, or they care but they can't do anything. So of course there are certain things the Buddhas can't do. They can't enlighten us, right? They can't just snap their fingers and make us all enlightened. If that were possible, then it would have happened a long, long time ago. So anyway, so why then would they not be acting on our behalf? So then there's another point. From the first moment they generated the enlightened mind, bodhicitta, Buddhas have concerned themselves exclusively with our well-being. Yeah, and that is kind of quite difficult to really imagine, but but you can kind of imagine it. So, if you have bodhicitta, even when you're right at the beginning of the bodhisattva path, then you have this, I mean, just think about the way of meditating on bodhicitta that starts off recognizing all sentient beings as one's mother, and not just like a superficial kind of experience, superficial kind of meditation, but like really feeling it in the heart, and it's like just part of you. So you see all sentient beings as your mother, and you're aware of their kindness. You have a very deep awareness and appreciation for their kindness. And then basically coming from that, wanting to repay the kindness. So they want happiness, just like yourself. They don't want suffering, just like oneself. So your only interest then is going to be how to bring that about, bring them the happiness that they want, but they don't have at the moment, and to free them from the suffering that they don't want. How are you going to do that? Best way, main way would be by teaching. Then you want to teach in exactly the right way. And you also want to be able to reach as many people as possible. So as an enlightened being, you can do that. You're not going to be confined to just teaching a few people at a time. You can just appear anywhere at any time according to the karma of the sentient beings and their openness and so on. So anyway, yeah, that's none of that's superficial. That's like it's your nature now. It's your nature now. So from that point onwards, whether it's going to take 3 countless great eons like the Buddha himself, or however long it's going to take, that's the only thing that you're going to be concerned with, right? Is just what you can do to help others, all other sentient beings, including ourselves. All their efforts to accumulate merit while they were still bodhisattvas were carried out in order to perfect their ability to act on our behalf, to become better at serving others. And when they became Buddhas, they did so for the sake of sentient beings. So right at the end, also finally achieving enlightenment was for the sake of all the sentient beings, including ourselves. So it's impossible that now, after having achieved that goal, they would not act on our behalf. And so again, same kind of argument, really. So they've built up to that, they got that far, then they're not going to help sentient beings? Doesn't make sense, does it? Especially, they know, they care, they're able, so why wouldn't they? Indeed, nothing could be more heartless than if all the Buddhas were to abandon us and stop acting on our behalf, because that's what they would be doing. They know, and they can help, but they don't. Must be because they don't care. They're heartless. Therefore, we can be certain that they are acting on our behalf. Moreover, if it is certain that all the Buddhas are acting on our behalf, then the method by which they are doing so could only be the one described in this verse. So this is one that we've come across before. The Munis, the Buddhas, do not wash away evil with water. Their hands do not remove the suffering of beings, nor can their knowledge be transferred to others. So how do they help? They liberate by teaching the true Dharma. So they show us the way, and then it's up to us whether we, go in that direction. They show us how to practice, they explain how to practice, then we have to practice. That's how they help us. No other way. That's the main way, anyway. Also, no one except our gurus could qualify as the Buddha's emanations who carry out this activity. So this is this is a crucial point, isn't it? So, okay, so if what this is saying, if the Buddhas are helping us, if they're definitely helping us, then it must be the guru that's the Buddha helping us, because the guru is the one that's helping us the best. And of all the people that are helping us, the ones that should be helping us the best would be the enlightened beings, because they know better and so on, right? So no one except our gurus could qualify as the Buddha's emanations who carry out this activity, for they are the ones who teach us the means of achieving the two supreme aims. So that's talking about one's own welfare and the welfare of others. It's a way of referring to, achieving their own welfare, omniscient mind. Welfare of others, in other words, using that omniscient mind, out of that omniscient mind, appearing in a way that helps others. The two supreme aims, the elevated ones, are the elevated states and the ultimate good. So no, sorry, I got that wrong. So the two supreme aims here is talking about actually while you're in psychic existence still, being born as a human or a god, and then on that basis, achieving the ultimate goodness, which is liberation and enlightenment. So therefore, Ketsang Jangimolam wrote, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas from the past are benefiting beings of today. If you can truly comprehend this point, it's funny, it says a little bit more like that. So more than that, it's like if you're willing to do a little bit more than just say that that's what's happening, but actually think about it, then you should apply that to a qualified guru. In other words, you need to realize that if the enlightened beings are helping you right now, then it must be in the form of your guru. Yeah, so then he says, it's quite interesting, really. Anyway, so Pabonga Dejinimbo says, my own guru also declared, each and every sentient being has a consummate Buddha sitting atop his head. I guess that's what he's saying is, every sentient being has an enlightened being with them, ready to help when there's an opening. Something like that. Well, anyway, yes, so that was the third one. So you get the idea now. Sort of loosening up your somehow solid, concrete way of grasping at things having to be the way they appear. So if the guru appears ordinary, then they must be ordinary. Sort of loosening things up a little bit like that, and then thinking along these lines. Enlightened beings. So of course, you have to think about the whole idea of enlightenment, possibility of enlightenment, possibility of your own enlightenment, and so on. What that all means. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense so much. I mean, if you think that, for example, you think that the Buddha Shakyamuni came into the world like 2,600 odd years ago. No, 2,500 odd years ago, and taught, and then passed away, and then that was it, finish, end of the story, apart from the teachings he left behind, then you're not going to be thinking that Buddha Shakyamuni is still helping you, because he's finished, extinguished, like a candle going out. Yeah, so, and of course there are many Buddhists who believe that, so then they wouldn't be able to work with the idea that the Buddha is still helping. If the Buddha is still helping, what would be the best way to help? If they're going to help, why would it be that somebody who's ordinary is helping you, but the enlightened being is sort of helping in some kind of peripheral way, some sort of secondary way? Kind of doesn't make sense, does it? But still, anyway, there's all to think about, isn't it? Okay, so that's about it then, really. So I don't know if anybody wanted to discuss anything. Everybody's muted. If not, then I could always read a little bit more. I don't know if there's really a fixed order for these next two, because, okay, so it says even nowadays Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are acting on behalf of all sentient beings. The next one is a guru is the agent for all Buddha's activities. And this is also quite short, a bit longer though. We'll see. This one, the bit that I always remember from this is the magnifying glass. So in fact, yeah, Sakya Pandita, one of the great early Sakya masters. So he gives the analogy of the sunglass, anyway, magnifying glass. Maybe that's what they called it, was a sunglass in those days. Although the sun's rays are supremely hot, without a sunglass, they do not make fire. The blessings of the Buddhas are the same. Without a guru, they have no effect. So no matter how hot it is, actually, yeah, because, like we know about the fire season in California and many other parts of the world, actually. No matter how, at the moment, no matter how hot the sun is, all it's able to do is dry up the wood and the grass and so on, so that it's easy to catch fire. But you never hear of the sun simply, igniting a fire, right? It has incredible power, but you have to be able to harness it with with a magnifying glass or a sunglass, it says here. Then, there's something I used to do as a kid as well, for sure. Either that, or you take the magnifying glass and you'd aim it on, your sister's arm or something, or maybe the kid sitting next to you in school, to burn them. That was always great fun. So anyway, you see, there's all that heat, all that energy, and you harness it with the magnifying glass, and you wouldn't be able to you can, that way you can start a fire, otherwise you wouldn't be able to. I think it's also a bit like a radio, radio, especially, well, I don't know how it works. I guess it's similar, really. It's all sorts of stuff going through the air, isn't it? So if you just stand there, I think we all know very well, if you just stand there, you can't do internet things, can you? You have to have the phone that focuses those rays and is able to turn them into a form that you can access. Or like with the radio, there's the radio waves all over the place, but without the radio and tuning in, you can't hear the things that are being broadcast, can you? So anyway, so Sakya Pandita's example was the sunglass, harnessing the energy of the sun with the sunglass. So harnessing the energy of the Buddhas can only happen through the guru. So I like that one. Anyway, I'll read a bit more. So a guru is the agent for all Buddha's activities. So the direction of the argument is, since the guru is doing all of the enlightened beings' activities for us, then they must be an enlightened being, because the enlightened beings wouldn't use an ordinary being to help us. So, though scriptural authority may be sufficient to convince those, so this is based on the idea that, the first one would have been because Vajradhara said, may be sufficient to convince those who are easily persuaded. It will provide us with greater certainty if we follow up the scriptural citations with a verification that takes the form of logical proof. So here is a proof that establishes the thesis that a guru is the agent for all Buddha's activities. So, so then earlier, when I was explaining the merit field, I described how the lone moon sitting up in the sky, I don't know if it's sitting or standing actually, can cast a separate reflection of itself upon the water contained in many different vessels. So that's a fact, isn't it? Okay. The moon can do that. There could be a million bodies of water, whether it's cups of water or ponds or lakes or whatever. And the reflection of the moon appears in all of them, right? No matter how many there are, without making any effort. This example can also be used to illustrate the following point. The minds of all the Buddhas are described as being of one essence within the Dharma sphere. So this actually makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's, what does it say? Rochik, one taste, same taste. So there's this whole argument, between Sutra and Tantra. According to Sutra, like, which in a way I can relate to. So if I become enlightened, then I would be still me, but now enlightened kind of thing. But now according to tantric teachings, it's more like it's kind of like, I don't think it's completely contradictory with that, but kind of like all enlightened beings just merge into one. And that kind of makes sense to me now, and I can't remember why, but it makes sense to me that, for example, I achieve enlightenment, and then if I were to achieve enlightenment in this lifetime, right? So then you can imagine I would be particularly helpful for people that I know, right? My family, for example, friends, people that know me. Because it's like, oh, Steve, but something different kind of thing, I mean, I don't know. I can't really imagine what it'd be like. So, but it seems to me quite odd just to say that, that one person is helping these sentient beings, but all the other Buddhas, they're not helping. It's the one that's got the karma with them. But because all enlightened beings would have karma with every sentient being, right? Because before, when they were still sentient beings and going from life to life, they also had this thing of everybody is their mother. So they would have karma with everybody. So anyway, I don't know if that's at all clear. I don't know if I'm really explaining myself clearly, but anyway, it makes sense to me that you wouldn't have one enlightened being helping a particular sentient being, but they would all kind of like in one mass, kind of like help appear in whatever way was useful to a given sentient being. So they're one essence, one taste within the Dharma sphere. This refers specifically to the ultimate wisdom in which their experience of supreme bliss and their direct realization of voidness, emptiness are inseparably combined. You can't separate one enlightened being from another. They probably are aware of their difference, because there is a difference. But anyway, for as far as we're concerned, there's no distinction between one and another. And in fact, I'm just trying to remember, I think it was maybe Gijingon Drapa. It was a kind of throwaway comment. I can't remember. It was very recent anyway. He was saying, there's no difference between one enlightened being helping you and 100 enlightened beings helping you. So the reason would be all enlightened beings are combined into each enlightened being. So if you've got, like Tara appearing in front of you, that would mean all enlightened beings are appearing to you in the form of Tara, not just this one person, Tara, appearing to you, and the other Buddhas are not. All enlightened beings would be appearing to you in that form, Tara, Chenrezi, Manjushu, so like that. Their ultimate, I think I can get to the bottom of the page, that'd be quite nice. Their ultimate wisdom manifests itself in the form of listener disciples before those beings who are suitable to be attained by listeners. So, like hearers and solitary realizers, or Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. In the form of solitary realizer disciples before those beings who are suitable to be attained by solitary realizers, and in the form of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas before those who are suitable to be attained by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Moreover, it also manifests itself in the form of a demon, or the deity Brahma, the god Brahma, that means, before those beings who require being tamed by either of them. The ultimate wisdom of the Buddhas can even appear as birds and wild animals before those who are suitable to be tamed by such beings. This point is declared in passages such as this verse from the Sutra on the meeting of the father and son that I was mentioning before. You act on behalf of sentient beings using the guise of Shakra and Brahma, and at times using the evil one's guise. It's talking about Mara. This the common world cannot comprehend. The reason that the Buddhas manifest themselves to us as ordinary spiritual teachers is because this form suits our merit. Indeed, they have no other means by which they could bring about our deliverance. It would serve no purpose if they tried to reveal themselves to us in some form higher than that of an ordinary spiritual teacher, for instance, in the form of a Buddha's enjoyment body I mentioned before, right? So that's just because we would not be able to perceive them. You have to be a Arya Bodhisattva. Even if they tried to manifest themselves in another form, such as a Buddha's supreme emanation body or as a Bodhisattva, again, we lack the karmic fortune to perceive them. On the other hand, if they revealed themselves to us in a lower form, such as a bird or a wild animal, it would not benefit us, since we would not entrust ourselves spiritual to such a being. I think I'll stop there. We can dedicate. So if we dedicate to the long lives of the holy gurus and to their wishes, plans being fulfilled exactly as they wish, for peace in the world, for peace in the hearts of the beings that inhabit this world, for the pandemic to come quickly to an end, and in fact all illnesses to become history, and for all of our friends and family members, maybe especially those who are ill, suffering in whatever way. So then let's remind ourselves to complete the dedication, I, the one whom dedicating, seems to be an I that's completely independent. But if such an I exists, we should be able to find it somewhere in our body, speech, and mind, or in our five aggregates, however you look at it. Should be able to find it in our body, or we should be able to find it in our mind, but it cannot be found. Therefore, it doesn't exist like that. And then the dedication itself also. If you look for it, you can't find it. So it also doesn't exist as it appears. That appearance is complete hallucination. And then also the virtue of past, present, future of ourselves and others that we dedicate, or we dedicated to. This is also me imputation. Doesn't exist as it appears. Okay. The book I was reading from, I'm sorry. It's this one. I think we might have given details for it before. Can you see? Is it clear? I'm not sure.
Liberation of the palm of your hand.
Yeah, liberation in our hands, part 2. Let me type that in anyway. Liberation in our.
Venerable Steve, do you feel like that's a better or equal translation to the other version of liberation that's out there?
Personally, I like it more. I think maybe it's better quality and the notes are very good.
I agree. That's all right. Thank you.
Okay. Part 2, and that's the Mahayana Sutra and Tantra Press. Mahayana Sutra and Tantra Press. Yeah, he's very good anyway. Art Engel, excellent translator. He's done lots of things. He's a real translator's translator. He's great. Okay. Did you get that? Oh, I didn't send it even. I only wrote it. Oops. Looks like Susan's gone already. So I'll do this.
It still hasn't come.
No, I know, because it was to Susan and oh, I see. Yeah, that's yeah, I know. I got mixed up. Sorry.
There it is.
Okay, so now you know. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Stay safe and healthy, everybody.
Yeah, I second that.
There's your delay.
As you did oh, the Tibetophone. See you. Bye.
Thank you, Venerable Steve.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.